There's not a lot of fingering going on here. There's a lot of open strings combined with a couple of fretted notes. So these are really interesting ways to look at the fretboard. So I'm going to break it up for you, and remember what I said, to look at these principles and to study them and think about them as you do them, because that's going to help you. It's going to help you in the long term to really understand what's going on and come up with your own things then. Okay, so let's start. So we're not going to worry too much about the names of the chords here. I'm just going to talk about what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about as I'm doing them. So basically the first shape is we've got an E root note at the 7th on the A string and another E root note over at fret 12 on the high E string. So both of these are the root note. Play them together, they sound like that. If you're wondering how I'm doing that, what I do is I use a pick on the 5th and a middle finger on the 1st string. That is referred to as hybrid picking. So all you got to do here is just make sure your first finger mutes the D string, and it probably will by default, but if it doesn't, just make sure it is. And we strum through it. We've got the open G and B string with that. So we have all the makings of the E minor chord. The root, the G is the 3rd, and the B is the 5th with the next octave E. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that principle, we're going to move it down to the 3rd position. So this is our G/C. So as you can see here, there's a pattern because I just did this. And then we've got this. The difference here is, and although you could do this, is that I'm not using two of the same note. So it's not C here and C there, which would sound like this. So you definitely could do that. It's quite a stretch though, so if you're not used to stretching that far, it could present some issues. But luckily we don't have to worry about that because we're going to be playing a B. So this time we've got the C root, well actually the bass note, not the root. We've got the B at the other end on the high E string, and we've got the G and B notes. So the G and the B are, the G is the root, the B is the 3rd, and then it repeats again the higher octave. So that's the G, B, E strings, and then the C is in the bass. Hence G/C. And I'm going to have to take my hand off at that point. It's aching a bit. Right, so what you'll begin to recognize here is the pattern basically is the fretted notes are on the A string and the E string. And we're using the open G and B strings with those. So I guess, you know, you could just pick out any combination you wanted to try out. These are a few of the options. It just depends on how far you can stretch, I guess. So E-7, this is bar 3. We have the E note again, which is our root. We've got the D note this time, that's our -7, high E string with the G and B open strings. Finally, not as much stretching to do here for G/C, so we're going to do it, let's see. It's probably easiest, well for me anyway, I would use 1st and middle. You could use middle and 3rd. But I think, yeah, 1st and middle is definitely better, considering that where you're coming from. So you can just move your 1st finger down. So in this case, we've got the G note, fret 3 on the E string, C bass note, and the open G and B strings. So the G and the B are our constant, and the fretted notes are all changing around the place, except for the roots. Moving on to bar 5. I think here I would use middle and 3rd for the left hand. It doesn't matter a lot what fingers you use, just whatever you feel comfortable with, but I think that's what I'd do here. So this time B note and E note with the open G and B strings. Go down to the 2nd position, so you want your middle finger at fret 3 on the A string. Put the 1st finger at fret 2 on the E string, and again G, B and open strings. This one's a nice one. There's something lingering about this one. There's no hope. It's that sort of, something's going to happen. It's not going to be pleasant. It's funny how music speaks to us like that. And moving into bar 7, a little bit different here. So we're going to use the first finger at fret 5 on the E string, third finger at fret 7 on the A string. Sounds pretty cool. And finally, this is the only time we don't use a fretted note on the high E string. So if I could break this up in a nutshell, like theoretically, I would say that it's melodic scale tones. Well, let's not say melodic, it sounds really ridiculous, but just scale tones on the E string mixed in with bass notes on the A string and the constant of the open G and B strings. And, you can study the, if you look at the highest note, we can look at it like that if we play it through. So 12, 7, 10, 3, 7, 2, 5, open. Jesus, that sounded horrible. Let's do that again. Just with those bass notes. So the bass notes inferring there the progression, and in the case of the E note, it's basically just minor. The C sometimes isn't pure C, but rather the bass note for like the G chord, except at the end for the C major 7. Playthrough time. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4.